Still dreaming about your summer holidays? How about this for a destination? The island of Zakynthos in Greece.
This beautiful sunny island hides a very dark secret. Zakynthos in Greece has become synonymous with corruption. Dubbed the island of the blind, it is seen as one of the glaring examples of dishonesty that has brought Greece to its knees. It was the mayor of Zakynthos who took action.
Corruption has cost Zakynthos alone €2 million a year handing out illegal benefits. Imagine how many fraudulent claims are being paid out throughout the country.
People paid between €1,000 and €2,000 for a certificate allowing them to claim a benefit meant for the blind. Among the claimants were hunters, divers and even taxi drivers. When the story broke, fraudulent claimants were furious when their benefits were taken away.
Those who were getting the allowances and who lost them blamed me, the chairman of the Disabled Association.
Zakynthos is not a lone example, as the General Inspector of the Public Administration says.
We have the same problem in the island of Chios as well, where there are 500 claimants, but only 107 appear on the census.
In fact, 1 in 6 disability claims in Greece is believed to be fraudulent. And corruption is not only linked to the health sector, it has reached endemic proportions across the country. The tax system has also been severely abused. Georgios is struggling after refusing to pay a bribe to a tax collector.
They asked for a bribe of €30,000 in order to decrease, in their own words, my penalties to €100,000. I refused, and then they went into the depth of making a fiscal scenario, according to which I owe to the state €1 million.
To contest the decision, Georgios must go through 19 different courts. Accepting the bribe could have been easier.
As you've probably guessed, we're zooming on corruption, not only in Greece, in Europe as a whole. But Greece is one of the more extreme examples. The economic cost of corruption in the EU as a whole, though, is estimated to amount to €120 billion of lost revenue a year. That's a little less than the EU's annual budget. And if you look at this graph, it appears to be a growing problem. To discuss this worrying trend, I'm joined by Michel Konix, President of Eurojust, the EU body which aims to improve the coordination of investigations and prosecutions across member states. Thank you for joining us. And Cobus de Short, Managing Director of Transparency International, which is waging a global fight against corruption. Cobus, I'd like to begin with you. You've been quoted as saying that Europe, by and large, fails the test. How corrupt is Europe?
A lot worse than what people often presume it is. And that is because the key institutions that make up a democracy, which Europe tend to think are strong, and Europeans tend to think are strong, are actually quite weak, and are weak in critical areas. For example, the whole political system, political parties, parliaments, the financing of political parties across Europe are much poorer than often assumed. Secondly, the relationship between money and politics in Europe is still clouded in secrecy. Lobbying legislation across Europe is weak. And thirdly, very importantly, the public accountability and public participation, so central to democracies to function across Europe, leaves a lot to be desired.
So corruption is a murky world. Michel, what are the driving forces behind corruption?
Well, the driving force and the criminal intent is certainly money. Money is power, and people in times of crisis are seeking for extra money. And the legal ways are not the most quickest ways. Hence, there is another way, and that's the illegal way. Bribery, swindling, fraud, corruption, or examples of these activities.
So we recently saw in a transparency report that Greece, Italy, Portugal and Spain, the countries most, or among the countries most struggling with corruption. They're those also who are mired the most in the economic crisis, as Michel kind of touched upon. So how far is corruption fueling the economic crisis?
Well, if you think about the links between economic crime and corruption, it is very clear that if you've got three key elements working together, one, a lack of public accountability, particularly on public financing. Secondly, a lack of participation of the general population to hold those in power to account. And thirdly, very importantly, impunity for those that break the law. And unfortunately, in the countries that you mentioned, all three of these have worked together, and that fuels both illegal activity, but also it enables corruption to flourish.
So, Michel, are we being complacent in fighting corruption?
Well, we do our best at EU level to fight these what we call manifold types of crimes in an organised and a structured way. And Eurojust is a body which is specialised in the coordination and the cooperation of these investigations. And that means that you, through a coordinated effort, putting the investigators and prosecutors, investigative judges of the countries concerned around the table, and establishing a strategy on how to tackle these crimes, you have more effect and quicker effect.
And the countries you work with, are they compliant? Are they helping you in your work, or are they hampering you?
The refusals based on bad will or a lack of will are absolutely exceptional.
Is that something you would corroborate?
Yes, I think Michel is by and large correct. However, I do think that besides looking at how you use the criminal system to deal with this, we should also look at what can be done at the political level to tackle this and the systemic problems much more thoroughly.
I will just cut in, because we've got an interesting report here, and it comes, it picks up on what you're saying, and it's the worrying role of our role models politically and socially, because despite an EU effort to stamp out corruption, there has been a spate of high-level cases. Let's watch this report.
In France, in December 2011, former President Jacques Chirac is found guilty of diverting public funds. In June this year, former Romanian Prime Minister Adrian Nastase allegedly attempts suicide after being convicted for illegally amassing around 1.5 million euros. Former Italian Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi has caused many headline-grabbing scandals, but there have been no convictions so far. Often cases are dropped because of the statute of limitations. But in Croatia, former Prime Minister Ivo Sanader has been charged with corruption for the 5th time. Even Brussels hasn't been spared. 3 high-profile MEPs have been accused of accepting bribes to push through changes to EU laws. And let's not forget religion, royalty and sport. Several corruption scandals plague the Vatican, accusations of embezzlement for a former member of the Spanish royal family, and reports of massive bribes at FIFA.
So this is obviously by no means an exhaustive list, but so how corrupt is Europe's political class?
Well, I would not argue that politicians decide they want to be corrupt, but the system that they find themselves in across Europe actually doesn't help to further transparent behavior. One of the greatest problems in Europe is that this relationship between money and politics is under-regulated and is not within the public domain.
So, to bring the debate a little to Eurojust, and I suppose credibility issues when it comes to scandal and corruption. Your predecessor had to resign amid a corruption scandal. How's that affected the credibility of Eurojust?
Well, this was an internal national matter, and the former president just took the decision to leave the institution, not to have any stain on the institution.
How effective is Eurojust? Let's just put it that way.
Well, we are adding value in that sense that we, at least after one coordination meeting, have an overview of all the criminal activities in the different concerned countries. And by having this overview and by sharing this in an open way, we, at the end of such a meeting, are in a position to have a strategy of tackling the problem. What we do not need, however, is this old-fashioned omnibus approach where you send requests from one country to another and where you have to wait 6 months after having received the answer. Eurojust is trained, is drilled to have rapid reactions and even to be on the spot during target dates throughout and thanks to its operational coordination centre.
So back in 1999, the whole commission that was led by Jacques Santer resigned amid a corruption scandal. Have things progressed a great deal from there? Is Europe leading by example, in your opinion?
Well, I would say that by and large, Europe has been good news for the fight against corruption across Europe. And we've seen that very positive pressures being put on countries during accession processes. We've also seen some sliding back. Bulgaria, Romania, pressure that were exerted had an impact. Perhaps there's a continued need for more pressure. In terms of whistleblower protection, I believe that Europe's performance, by and large, is extremely poor. And there, one would urge the Commission to really put up the pressure a lot more. But it would be fair comment to say that without Europe as it exists today as a political construct, the fight against corruption across Europe would have been more difficult. So that's positive.
So I'd like to thank you both very much for joining us on the front line. And just remind you also of this fact that no European country in a recent survey by Transparency International came out 100% free of corruption. A recent Eurobarometer survey has shown that 3/4 of Europeans believe corruption is a major problem in their country. That's all for On the Front Line, but I'm on Twitter and interested in your thoughts.